I was a simple man, a husband, a father, until the day I caught my wife in bed with another man. That moment shattered everything I knew, everything I was. I lost my family, my freedom, my sanity. 7 years in prison turned me into something else, something darker. Now, I'm out. And the man they called Steve Brooks is gone. My ex-wife thinks she can walk back into my life begging for help. She has no idea what I've become or the revenge I've planned. This isn't a story of forgiveness. It's a reckoning. The sound of metal clanging echoed, setting a cold rhythm. A wheezing noise from a machine joined in occasionally. The dark walls around me shone with a soft red light from a grate above, making the long hallway look even longer. Every 10 feet, there were red sensors at waist height. A black glove pressed one of these sensors, and a wall slid open. Inside was a plain room with just one bench. On that bench lay 2 young girls, one 8 years old and the other 5. The older girl wore a white outfit with a light jacket. Her brown hair was in a braid, and although she was young, she had an attitude that made her seem much older. The younger girl was dressed in a simple white dress, and looked like she felt life was unfair to her. I spoke up, my voice echoing, "Girls, I am your father." Both girls shouted, "No!" The older one insisted, "That's not true." The younger one pouted, "That's impossible." Before I could say anything else, the girls dashed past me and back into the hallway. I tried to follow, but my steps felt heavy, as if something was pulling at my feet. Once in the hallway, I saw a striking woman in her late 20s. She wore a shiny outfit that reminded me of costumes from adventure movies. Her long brown hair was perfectly braided. She was holding on to a strong-looking man in a white shirt and dark vest, who was holding something that looked like a futuristic gadget. The girls clung to the man's legs. The woman spoke with a mocking tone. "Only you could be so bold." Suddenly a loud sound echoed down the hallway, and I fell to the ground. It felt like I couldn't breathe as despair washed over me. I lay on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, the red light fading from my sight. An elderly man's voice said softly, "He's more machine than man now, twisted and evil." I woke up suddenly, feeling trapped. My heart raced as I struggled to breathe. I hurried to my small apartment's balcony without bothering to put on more than my boxers. The cool night air was refreshing. I leaned on the wooden railing looking out at the lights of the city. I felt calm watching the skyline. "It's been a while since a movie scared me like that," I said to the city, finding comfort in my favorite place. I had Nashville, and it felt like home. "What was that, Stoney?" a sleepy voice called from inside. "Nothing," I replied firmly, and the apartment fell silent. "My name is Steve Brooks, but everyone calls me Stoney. I wish it was because I look strong, but that isn't quite true. I might have a tough look, but I don't meet the ideal standards. When a man in his 40s starts to lose his hair, he can pretend he's choosing to shave it all off. I worked hard to lose excess weight, and now my hands have 'Stay Down' tattooed on them. I served 7 years for a serious crime, but got my sentence reduced to 5 years for good behavior and taking classes. I learned a tough lesson in that time: show no weakness. Whether dealing with hard situations or facing challenges, you never let anyone see your struggles. There are those who will take advantage of any vulnerability. I am no one's target any longer. Before my tough time, I was a typical computer geek. I spent too much time playing video games instead of learning how to socialize. I often wondered if I would go blind before I turned 20 from reading magazines for their excellent stories. Still, despite my past, I eventually found a girlfriend who shared my interests and accepted me for who I was. She could quote as much from our favorite comedies as I could. She was definitely a lively person who enjoyed getting attention in unconventional ways. Sadly, I didn't fully understand how complicated things were until it was too late. I was too busy enjoying life to notice that she was causing trouble behind the scenes. Melanie Pierce was the center of my life in college. Along with studying programming languages, we got along really well. She was like the Princess Leia to my Han Solo. Not long after we finished college, we got married. I found a good job as a computer programmer, and Melanie graduated too. Once our first child, Abigail, was born, we decided it was best for her to stay home with the baby. We had no way of knowing that there would be a well-known person with a similar name later. I was not exactly a time traveler. Abby quickly became my pride and joy. From the moment she arrived, I was wrapped around her little finger. I did my best to support my family. My wife and I shared parenting duties. It wasn't unusual for people like me in tech to survive on snacks and soda. Those late-night cries from the crib often interrupted my work on the computer, which kept me awake more than sleep did. We were a young family starting out, but we were managing. 3 years later, we welcomed Allison into our lives. I didn't regret having her, even if it wasn't planned. Life, however, began to get more complicated. Looking back, people might say that things started to go downhill about a year after Allie was born. We had bills to pay, activities to attend, and all sorts of events demanding more money. Working long hours became routine for me. If I wasn't coding software, I was designing websites to earn extra cash. Melanie wanted my attention and often expressed her concerns about our finances. Both girls wanted their daddy, and often Melanie felt the need to pull me away from the computer to spend time with them. By the time Abby turned 8, things hit a rough patch. I was too focused on my computer screen trying to fix mistakes to realize what was happening. There were no clear signs to warn me that trouble was coming. Then one day, Melanie was waiting for me at home, accompanied by 2 men. One was a sheriff who handed me an envelope, and the other, Doug, was there for support. He was involved with Melanie and believed their connection was stronger than the family I had built. It seemed they thought they could create a better home without me. Melanie even had my bags packed so I could leave quietly. That day felt overwhelming. In my frustration, I grabbed Abby's softball bat and let my anger take over. Doug wasn't going to take my family away from me. In my fit of rage, I swung at him, letting my emotions guide me without thinking about the consequences. In my frenzy, I even pushed Melanie aside. I was completely unaware that my daughters were watching. Soon the calm shattered. The police came, and I was arrested for my actions. A protective order was placed against me, preventing any contact with Melanie and the girls. Stories of men fighting for their families might sound heroic, but this was no movie. My actions led me to serve a harsh sentence, and my wife was left in charge of our finances. I was represented by a public defender who didn't inspire much confidence. Did you know that in Tennessee, a parent still has to pay child support even if they are in prison? This was true for me, too. Thankfully, I had saved some money from my job to prepare for tough times. I set up automatic payments to ensure support, and the funds began to dwindle quickly due to the costs involved. To make matters worse, I also had to pay for Doug's medical bills, which felt incredibly unfair. My wife ended up with the house and car while I received only what was left in my pension plan. Because I had planned ahead, I had something to rely on. But after all the fines and payments, I had nothing left. Every request I made to see my daughters was denied by their mother. It all began with, "It's a bad idea, Steve. They are still having nightmares from what happened." Yes, Melanie and Doug got married. The excuses then changed to, "It would just be too awkward, Steve. I think we should just move on with our lives." Move on with their lives as long as she got the child support check. I'm not sharing this so you can feel sorry for me. I want you to understand. And before I go on, let me be clear. I am okay with paying child support. Abby and Allie need it. They are my daughters, and I want to make sure I help provide for them. I just wish it didn't go to their mother and Doug. And it bothers me that I can't even see my daughters because of my past actions. Apparently, I was seen as a bad father and husband without even knowing it. Joe Kerr and Jack Napier expressed it perfectly that one day. A warm arm wrapped around my waist. A woman leaned against my back, pulling me out of my thoughts. "What's on your mind, Stoney?" she asked. I have to admit, her touch felt nice. It reminded me that not everyone is difficult or rude. I wish I could say the hug felt more than just comforting, but that would make things complicated. With anyone else, I might have been more open, but for her, I kept it simple. "Go back to bed, Brett." There would be no discussion about it. Brett Butler was a small blonde with curves that could easily turn heads. She had a great singing voice and could sing anything from Janis Joplin to Dolly Parton. She grew up with a dad who loved baseball and a mom who adored Gone with the Wind. Her dad wanted to name her after a baseball player, but having a daughter changed that. Her mom wanted Scarlett, and they settled on Brett Scarlett Butler. Honestly, I didn't care much for the backstory. In a sleepy voice, Brett said as she let go of me, Your guitar is by the door. Music has always been a constant in my life. Before it was everywhere, it was still there for me. I remember getting my first album, The Beatles' Yesterday and Today. A friend gave it to me when it wasn't cool to listen to them. It was before classic rock took over, and I treasured that gift for its connection to music, not for popularity. Later, music became a background sound, but it was still important. In high school, while running cross-country, heavy metal poured through my headphones, helping me push through the tiring miles. When I worked on tasks like gaming or coding, it was my focus tool. I'm sure others appreciated my headphones, since playing a song on repeat could get annoying. Music helped me block out distractions so I could concentrate. But now, music has the power to calm me. For those who think I misquoted that saying about soothing emotions, feel free to check. Yes, I can be a bit of a nerd, but music really helps me find my center. After my outburst of anger, music became my escape. If not for strumming the strings on my guitar, I might have exploded with emotion. Music saved me from myself. Since my outburst, my ability to control anger has faded. My compassion disappeared too. Everyone has a sad story, but I believe if you want change, you need to work for it. If you just sit and wait for help, you'll be disappointed. Sometimes those who work hard still face difficulties. After getting out of prison, I felt angry at the world. My finances were a mess due to obligations. My parents disowned me after my actions. I had become the black sheep. While going to jail might not matter in some views, in my family, it was unacceptable. Most of my friends were settling down and didn't have space for an ex-con. And the one friend I thought would stand by me chose a different path, keeping my children away from me. Lesson learned. Never marry your best friend. Because when she turns around to hurt you, you won't have anyone to lean on for support. I had never been a very religious person. I often dozed off during sermons and just went along with whatever you're supposed to say on Sundays. A lot of people think all Christians are a bit extreme like those from the Westboro Baptist Church, but there's more to it than that. Some groups are genuinely doing good things in the community. I will always be thankful to the First Baptist Church. They helped me during my tough times. They connected me with Project Return, a group that provided me with a suit and helped me find jobs that were open to people with a past like mine. Without their support, I wouldn't have been able to get a job, afford a place to live, and pay child support. In Tennessee, if you miss a child support payment, you could end up in jail for a while. It's hard to understand how that works when you can't earn money if you're locked up. I think a law like that was likely made with a bitter ex-spouse in mind. Sadly, returning to my old job as a computer programmer wasn't an option. People believed that someone with a felony could never be trusted with coding. They thought we might misuse that knowledge. Luckily, thanks to Project Return and pro-employment, I found a job at a factory as a CNC machinist. Yes, I accepted help when I needed it, but I used it to get back on my feet. I worked hard at my job and never missed a day. My earnings went to bills and child support. Unfortunately, I was surrounded by co-workers who spent their paychecks on drinking. It was a cycle that just repeated. Well, that wasn't my path. My one escape was an old guitar I bought from a pawn shop. While I was in prison, I took anger management classes and music lessons. Music became a way for me to feel better. I could express my feelings through the strumming of my guitar. Even in movies like The Avengers, characters found calm in music. I noticed I could make extra money by working weekends, so my weekends were on Mondays and Tuesdays. I spent that time playing my guitar or exploring Lower Broad to enjoy local music. Going to these places during the week meant I could avoid the crowds and any mess from people celebrating. I didn't have any big dreams, but playing my guitar was my way of letting out my emotions. It had been 10 years since that one day. The anger toward Melanie faded away long ago. That guy will always be difficult, and while I found temporary relief from my frustrations, he remained with my ex-wife. The ache of not seeing my daughters has become just a distant feeling. I know they likely think of me as just a memory since they have another father figure now. So this troubling dream kept nagging at me, and I wondered why. I glanced at my guitar, leaning against the door. I wasn't sure if playing could help ease my thoughts tonight. A small smirk crossed my face. See, Brett, you thought you knew me well. But then I noticed an old, messy photo album on the kitchen table lit by a lamp. I might not have been able to attend my daughter's events like softball games or dance recitals, but I kept up with their lives through the newspaper. Anytime there were articles about their achievements, I saved them in this album. I'm not afraid to admit that I occasionally looked them up on Facebook. I really want to remind them to be careful about keeping their accounts private so strangers can't look them up. Even though it hurt to see photos of family outings without me, I still found joy in watching them grow. As I flipped through the pages of the album, something stood out. Abby turned 18 today, and she will graduate from high school soon. My obligation to pay child support for her is ending. You would think I'd feel happy about having more money to myself, but instead it felt like losing my final connection to her. I still have Allie, but Abby was my youngest. In 3 years, I might feel completely alone. Time to play those strings. I used to dislike a certain song I heard on the radio. The upbeat tune didn't match the sad lyrics, but then I found a slower version of Waves by Mr. Probs that matched my feelings perfectly. As I strummed my guitar, it felt like I was letting my heart speak. No tears fell from my eyes, but my guitar seemed to share my feelings. Sitting on the balcony, the buildings of Nashville stood as my silent audience. The cold pavement and the cars below gave me a front-row view. My face above the water. My feet can't touch the ground, and it feels like I can see the sands on the horizon. Every time you are not around, I'm slowly drifting. A young voice flowed from the sliding glass door. Brett had the tune down perfectly. It captured the bittersweet feeling of watching someone drift away and feeling powerless to stop it. I turned to see Brett had ignored my request to go back to bed. Because of that, I lost my chance to join her in harmony, but my fingers kept playing the right notes without missing a beat. I frowned at her disobedience. However, I wasn't her parent. I didn't have the right to tell her what to do. Deep down, I loved her singing. When she sang to my strumming, it gave me hope that I mattered to someone. I shifted my gaze to the skyline while my fingers continued to play. Before she could begin the chorus, I mentioned, "Abby turns 18 today." Yeah, I noticed her birthday card marked "Return to Sender" on the table. A few chords escaped my guitar, and silence filled the moment. I put it with all the other cards you've tried to send to Abby and Allie. More chords, more silence. Maybe one day they'll see that you cared. I remained quiet, letting the sound of my guitar fill the space. After a while, Brett took the hint and went back inside. Her words were a fragile hope, but I doubted that day would ever happen. Saying it out loud would only set me up for disappointment. Eventually, sleep took over my worries. I don't play to draw attention. I know better than to expect much from tips in jars. If I were young and had no responsibilities, maybe I'd be like Brett. Her story is like many artists here in Music City. She came from a small town and was dazzled by the big city lights. She thrived in theater, receiving applause for her performances. Her parents supported her until she decided to chase a music career instead of going to college. She left home behind and never looked back. I think her parents would welcome her back if she wanted to leave the spotlight. We all live with the choices we've made. I'm no exception. My wife chose someone else, and I reacted poorly, which disrupted my life. She was gone, and I let my hurt and pride get the better of me. If only I'd thought about the girls, they might still be in my life. I wasn't a tough guy like in the movies. All the practice I got from video games didn't help me in reality. Brett had her own struggles. First, she fell for her band's guitarist. When emotions bubble over, bands often break apart. She should have listened to the advice from others. But how do we learn wisdom without being reckless first? Her second mistake was trusting a sketchy music producer. He had connections but took advantage of young women trying to make it big. If they wanted success, they had to navigate his demands in ways that sometimes felt uncomfortable. I guess she wondered how things could get worse, and life showed her. Her band's gig at a popular lounge got mixed up with another booking right after she turned down the producer's advances. He claimed it was an accident. A rumor spread that she had betrayed her boyfriend. She couldn't clear her name and soon found herself without a band or a producer. The lounge manager gave her a chance to sing 2 songs before the next act, but she needed a guitarist. Why did I step in to help her? I felt she needed support, and something about her made me care. Maybe I was just feeling lonely and missing my daughters, and she reminded me of what Abby might have been at her age. I didn't want to let my little girl down again. But Brett wasn't my daughter. This was her one chance, and I felt the urge to take action. It wasn't like the movies that day. Cinderella didn't find her slipper. Brett didn't meet a producer. She didn't connect with the venue owners. We hadn't practiced together or played as a team, so things were off between us. To top it off, she was very upset. The situation was tough for her. There was no bouncing back from that. Her 2 songs went by quickly, and I wasn't even sure if anyone put any money in the jar. Still, I did my best. Maybe good things would come my way with Abby in the future. We all have to live with our choices. The blonde girl thanked me a lot for helping her, but she wasn't finished asking for favors. Her boyfriend had kicked her out and she couldn't go back home. She needed a place to stay. I found her appealing, but my feelings were not based on love. I could have taken advantage of the situation, like I often did with drunken girls when I was off work. But I didn't want to be that guy. She had already been treated poorly, and I didn't want to add to her troubles. I gave her one night to regroup, but I should have known better. Whenever a girl says she needs 5 minutes to get ready, it usually takes a lot longer. I shouldn't have agreed to just one night. A year later, she was still living with me. She turned out to be helpful. She found enjoyment in dealing with the drunken girls who came around. She was a great friend. Why she decided to stay with an older guy like me, I couldn't figure out. Mornings come too early for my taste. I wish mornings would start later, maybe around noon. Mornings that start with loud banging on my door are the worst. Doesn't this person realize that not everyone wakes up at dawn? I really wished that the person knocking would just go back to their own business and leave me alone. One thing I've learned is to never ask, how can today get any worse? Life will always find a way to answer that question. Instead of wondering if it can get worse, I just accept that it will. By doing so, I keep my expectations low, and I won't be disappointed if things turn out better than I thought. Honestly, I often felt like life was giving me the short end of the stick. For instance, looking through the peephole to see who woke me up was a mistake. There stood my ex-wife. She looked good. In the 10 years since we parted, she had aged beautifully, like fine wine. She wore a lovely sundress, and I could remember how gentle her presence had once felt. After all these years, seeing her again stirred up many feelings. I had thought I was over all that, but there she was, knocking on my door at an ungodly hour. I opened the door calmly. I didn't want to show that she disrupted my sleep. I could only guess what her motives were. There wasn't much left she could take from me. Hi, she said nervously. Hi? She hadn't spoken to me in 10 years, and those were the first words she chose? I saw that my silence was bothering her. She shifted her weight back and forth, a sign that she was uncomfortable. I'm looking for Steve Brooks. I was told he lived at this address. Is he here? I thought I had moved past my feelings for her, but seeing her again felt like reopening old wounds. Whoever said that time heals all wounds clearly hadn't dealt with an ex-spouse. Please, I need to talk to him. It's important. It was always the same with her. It was all about her. I decided it was time to stop playing games with Melanie. It was fun to give her the silent treatment, but I felt I should end it. Your restraining order makes this tough. If you have something to say, talk to your lawyer, I said, each word carrying a firm finality. But just as I was about to close the door, Melanie put her hand on it and looked at me in surprise. For some reason, I couldn't bring myself to shut the door in her face. If it were anyone else, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But here I was, hesitating. Steve? Is that you? You look... She searched for the right words while looking closely at me. I had lost some weight, no longer had a belly, and decided to go bald instead of holding onto my thinning hair. It worked better for some, but not so much for me. The tattoos on my arms likely caught her attention too, and I thought I saw her eyes widen. Go home. This time I didn't hesitate. I slammed the door right in front of her. It was so hard that the whole apartment shook. I expected complaints from neighbors, but I didn't care. If they knew the situation, they'd probably say I should have done it sooner. I wished I could say I felt relief from slamming the door. Instead, I felt like a stone. The noise brought Brett out of her room. She was wearing a Tennessee Titans shirt, my shirt. I'd need to talk to her about that later, but I couldn't help but notice she looked good in it. Stoney, is everything up? Melanie interrupted her from outside. Steve, it's about Abby. My disgust was clear answering Brett's unfinished question. Now I understood why Melanie was here. Furious, I burst open the door. Now that Abby's 18, you come here to ask for more money? The look in Melanie's eyes reminded me of a tough time I had handled before. I felt angry, but I remembered my resolution to stay calm. I turned, grabbed my guitar, and went to the balcony. In my rush, I forgot to close the door behind me. I guess Melanie took that as an invitation to come in. That's not why. She started, but I was too focused on my music. I began strumming the guitar, but the sounds were all jumbled. Nothing seemed right. I took a deep breath, clenched my jaw, and closed my eyes, hoping to find a peaceful spot in my mind. This was not it. Inside, I heard Brett and Melanie talking. "Let him go, hun. No one can talk to him like this," Brett said, understanding me well. She was young but wise beyond her years. Melanie replied sharply, "Look, I don't know who you are, but I need to talk to him about his daughter." I would have loved to watch the exchange while snacking. Brett, being a strong Southern girl, wasn't one to back down. She stood by me, and I knew she wouldn't let anyone pressure me. "Let him calm down, Mrs. Harper," Brett said, using Melanie's last name in a way that showed she felt it didn't fit her anymore. "Doesn't he care about his daughter? Bless your heart." I barely heard the rest before there was some commotion. I heard Melanie say softly, "Let go of me." Then, something sounded like a chair being pushed across the floor, followed by a loud noise that must have been something hitting the table. Care about his daughter? Does it look like he doesn't? He works so hard to keep up with child support. He lives in this tiny place just to make sure he's never late. I'm sure he pays more than he even has to. I knew Melanie was trying to speak, but she often cut others off. Then envelopes were dropped on the kitchen table. Every year he sends birthday and Christmas cards, but every time they come back. He hasn't seen his daughters in 10 years, but he thinks about them all the time. That struck a nerve. I was still their father. I closed my guitar and moved away, knowing Brett wouldn't back down. "That's enough," I said, taking another calming breath. I could still feel the anger inside me, but it was enough for Brett to back off. The look on Melanie's face told me everything. It was like another wave crashing down. She looked through the photo album and the collection of photos and newspaper clippings I had saved. Confused by all the envelopes, her eyes widened as she glanced at me, and I could see she noticed the hurt I was hiding behind my anger. "Steve, I had no idea," she spoke softly. Melanie often struggled with expressing her apologies, and I couldn't remember her ever saying it outright. Her sincerity was clear in her gentle voice and the tear rolling down her cheek. I wanted to wipe that tear away, to comfort her, but that feeling was quickly quieted. It felt like it was too late for that. "So what's happening with Abby if it's not about the money?" Melanie took a moment, still gazing at the album. She was looking at the last picture of the four of us when we were a family, enjoying a rare vacation together at Common Falls State Park. It was an old picture, fading with time. She kept her tone gentle as she said, "Abby ran away from home a few days ago." "I didn't take her," I replied sharply. The last thing I wanted was to be accused of something like that. I couldn't go back to prison again. Melanie seemed confused by my response and looked to Brett for support, but Brett showed little reaction. Melanie shook her head. "No, I know that. I didn't say you did." Brett jumped in, asking pointedly, "Did you contact the police?" Melanie sighed heavily, looking worn out. I could tell she was expecting something different from me, maybe hoping I'd act like the old Steve. Let me explain. When Abby became a teenager, she started to rebel, which is common for that age, but things got really tense between her and Doug. "You're not my real father," became her rallying cry. As she grew, their arguments grew worse. I'd hear her say things like, "I wish my dad had done more." I tried to keep the peace, but her voice trailed off, filled with sadness. Inside, I felt a mix of triumph and pain, knowing that at least she still saw me as her father, not Doug. Recently, the tension between Doug and Abby reached a breaking point. Doug said things like, "While you live in my house, you'll follow my rules." After one heated argument, Abby vanished. "Allie believes she might have come here to find you." Once again, Brett interrupted. "You still didn't answer about calling the police. Couldn't you just talk to your lawyer?" Her question echoed my own thoughts, and I noted Melanie's surprise at hearing me called Stony. I raised my hand and asked, "So you think Abby is in Nashville?" Melanie nodded. She hated living in Skokie, the winters, and how cold Lake Michigan was. She wanted to return to Tennessee. She looked directly at me. She wanted to be with you. Then she glanced down at the envelopes. But all we received was your child support payment. We never heard from you. Before she could finish, I interrupted. You wouldn't let me see them while I was in prison, and that restraining order didn't help. Melanie's lip trembled as she replied, I didn't want them to see their father like that. I was scared. I've never seen you that way, and I didn't want them to either. I turned away, wishing they hadn't been exposed to my past actions. Even if the other person deserved it, my daughters never should have witnessed any of it. Just then, I felt an arm around me, trying to comfort me. At first I thought it was Melanie, but it was Brett. Have you tried calling her? What teenager doesn't have her phone? I wasn't sure if Melanie was annoyed by Brett's question or if she felt awkward about Brett's closeness. Her response sounded a bit condescending. Of course I have. She won't answer. What rebellious teenager does? I didn't want to be caught in the middle of this tension. I quickly tried to steer things in a better direction. Brett, pull up her profile picture on Facebook and send it to everyone. Ask them to keep an eye out for her and to call me if they think they've seen her. Brett quickly sprang into action, almost as if it were a mission to save her own sister. Before long, she laughed and typed rapidly on her phone. She looked up and said, Bear can't believe that's your daughter. He thinks she must look like her. Brett paused and her tone shifted. Mother. Melanie flushed at Brett's words. I couldn't help but find it charming how she blushed at compliments. She rarely received them, especially about her looks. I turned to Melanie. Do you have any idea where she might go? No, it's been 10 years since I've been here, Stay. She corrected herself, trying to adapt to the new me. Stony. I was aware of how intimate this was and felt a connection that went beyond just physical attraction. It was different with her in a way that felt safe. When she pulled away, she continued with her hand, changing the sensation just enough. I could feel the need to change the situation, so I gently lifted her to stand. She kept her hold on me and wrapped a leg around my waist, guiding us closer. But I had my own idea. With one smooth motion, I picked her up, holding her securely. I turned and leaned her against the door, balancing her in my arms, and felt the excitement build. Her delighted response rang out, and I could feel the energy between us growing intense. I slowed down for a moment, wanting to savor every part of this connection. It was a mixture of warmth and trust as I held her close, providing her with support. When she began to tremble, I could barely keep my grip as everything around us heightened. In that moment, it felt like everything inside me poured out. Once we settled down a bit, I changed how I held her, wrapping her legs around my waist as I carried her to the couch. I set her down gently and went to the kitchen, quickly returning with a warm cloth to help her. It was a thoughtful gesture I remembered from my past, and now I wanted to share it with Brett. Though I cherished what had just happened, I worried about how it might complicate things between us. After all, I was significantly older than her. I touched her forehead lightly and took a moment to gather my thoughts in the bathroom. As I was lost in my own musings, I must have missed someone knocking at the door. When I stepped out, I overheard voices and decided to listen in. Melanie, my ex, sounded flustered. I forgot to give Stony Abbey's number. Brett's reply was calm and somewhat playful. Thanks, I'll make sure he gets this. And can you tell him I'm at the Omni? My ex sounded anxious, and it was strangely satisfying to hear her uncertainty. Thank you, Brett replied in a sweet yet condescending tone before closing the door. I wondered how much of our earlier moment Melanie had heard. It felt awkward, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. When I returned to the living room, I noticed Brett had answered the door without dressing. I suspected she wanted to show my ex what she was up against. I'm going to take a shower, I said, hoping to clear my mind about everything that had happened. As I stepped into the warm shower, I appreciated the calming water and the new shower head Brett had insisted we get. It was just what I needed to collect my thoughts. The warm shower allowed me a moment to think clearly. The idea of reconnecting with my ex-wife was an intriguing thought. She looked better than I remembered. There was a change in her, but part of me still considered the memories we shared. She had hurt me in the past, and I felt some anger about that. As her husband, I had always tried to be caring, wanting to ensure we both enjoyed our time together. I never wanted to be someone who rushed things. But now, my feelings were different. I just felt frustrated. I had not held much regard for others since then. My encounters with others felt shallow, not meaningful. Melanie was different. We had shared years together despite her choices that ended our marriage, and she was the mother of my daughters. No matter what happened, I had to think of them. I might not have deep feelings for her now, but I owed it to my kids to consider the bigger picture. And then there was Brett. Just a while ago, she seemed like a daughter to me. I cared for her, wanting to support and guide her. But I also worried, what if our relationship deepened? Would she want a family? I thought about how I could barely manage my own life. To be truthful, I felt youthful when I was with her. She brought out a side of me that felt capable and ready to care for someone again. Brett understood me in ways others did not. She accepted my flaws without trying to change me, finding that in anyone was rare, especially in a partner. I didn't feel regret about the moments we shared. She was energetic and made me feel alive again. I might need to take better care of myself to keep up with her. But that's healthy, right? Staying fit has its benefits, regardless of the reasons. Just the memory of our connection stirred something in me. Then Brett joined me and we shared a warm, gentle moment. She leaned against me and I felt a comforting closeness. I wanted to say something, but she gently stopped me. "Just hold this moment. It's special," she said, smiling. "And it felt good to show your ex where you stand now. You're mine, after all." I wanted to express my feelings with a simple gesture, a soft connection that felt nice. It was a beautiful end to what started as a chaotic morning. I wish I could say the rest of the day flowed just as well, but wishes don't always come true. When I called my daughter's phone, I reached her voicemail. Hearing her voice after so many years surprised me. She sounded so grown up. Her playful tone made me smile, but I hesitated to leave a message. I didn't know how she would respond. Would she see me differently? Would I scare her? The thought worried me, but I couldn't shake it. The cold cell was lit by a faint light, and the concrete walls were marked with strange symbols and scratches. Tally marks covered the surfaces, with one bold word standing out written in red. The cot in the corner was plain, with a thin blanket that offered little comfort. Beneath that blanket lay a young woman. Her once bright blonde hair faded to a duller shade. She had her hair in pigtails, one dyed red and the other black. Her sun-kissed skin had turned pale, maybe because she hadn't seen the sun in a while. The wool blanket wrapped around her like a dress, leaving her shoulders bare. In a voice that sounded more like it came from New York than from the South, she said, "I need your help with something, Puddin'." I couldn't say no. I climbed onto the cot and forgot where I was. All I could see was her, and I could feel the warmth in her eyes, even after I may have treated her poorly. She leaned closer, and I didn't pull away. Suddenly, I found myself on the floor looking up at her. The girl with the red and black pigtails showed surprising strength and had me gently held down. She used the blanket to keep my arms in place. There was an intense look in her eyes as she shouted, "Yahtzee!" In an instant, the prison cell faded away, and the room transformed into a greenhouse. The bright lights changed to a soft red glow, and the air became hot and humid. Exotic plants surrounded us. Some looked like strange, carnivorous plants, while others had beautiful blooms and long vines. Pollen floated in the air like dust in the sunlight. One of the vines slowly moved toward her. She didn't resist as it wrapped around her, covering her completely. Soon, her unique features were hidden, leaving only her silhouette visible, as if the plant embraced her gently. From the shadows, a woman stepped into view. She looked to be in her late 30s or early 40s, exuding confidence and charm. It was hard to tell her hair color in the red light. She wore a striking green dress that clung to her figure. Her boots clicked on the floor, making sure everyone noticed her arrival. She spoke with a condescending tone. "You've only scratched the surface. Nature is like a hydra. You may cut one part, but others will grow in its place. You can destroy a tree, but you'll never leave the forest." Looking around, she raised her arms. "Rise, my beauties. Our opponent still stands." I hadn't noticed before, but now there were 3 plant-like forms. They began to break free, much like butterflies emerging from their cocoons. One by one, 3 young women appeared. The youngest looked like she was just a teenager, while another was caught between being a girl and a woman. The third was the girl who had just been with me on the cot. All 3 now looked like younger versions of the woman in green. Their eyes had a glossy look, and they moved as if they were under her spell. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadowy figure in the distance. I woke up, throwing the imaginary blanket off of me. It felt different in reality. I realized Brett had made my bed her own and was lying over me snugly. My sudden movement to escape the blanket made her tumble off the bed. Brett quickly got up, fists ready and a fierce look on her face. "What the heck?" she started, but her expression softened when she saw my confused state, still shaken from the nightmare. My face was hidden in my hands, so I couldn't tell how I appeared to her. I sensed she felt uncertain about being so close after our earlier interaction. I couldn't help it. My mind was playing tricks on me. I felt the need to get away, not just from those memories, but from myself. In a flash, I put on some jeans, a worn Eagles t-shirt, my boots, and my riding jacket. I might not have had 7 women on my mind, but I thought of 4. One who sought control, another who lingered in my thoughts, and 2 I hoped to see again. Not exactly a song, but I never claimed to be a musician. Grabbing my keys, I flung open the apartment door. "Where are you going, Stoney?" Brett asked, her voice concerned, not confrontational. "My church," was all I said. I didn't look back as I left the building. One good thing about Nashville is that in the early morning the highways are mostly clear. There are still some cars on I-40 and I-65, but not enough to worry about the drivers in front of you. This is especially true during the week. On weekends, it can be busier as people hurry home, hoping to avoid any issues. At night, a motorcycle rider can really enjoy the road. There's something freeing about an open road. It's just you and your bike. When you want to turn, the bike goes where you want. The only thing that matters is the road ahead. There are no complicated relationships or worries. It's all about you and the journey. If you know the roads well, you can let your mind wander and reflect on where you are and where you want to go in life. During my time in prison in Memphis, I found a way to get involved in the weightlifting area. I was new and not very tough-looking. While I was there for fighting, I lacked the intimidating look that some had. I did learn that finding the right people can create a sense of safety. I kept myself busy and eventually got stronger. Some people talked about how muscles remember things. It's when you do an action again and again until your body does it without thinking. I found this interesting and even looked it up in the prison library. Soon I was on the back roads near Nashville, heading back to where everything began. I was going to see my old home before things changed. When I met Melanie, she had a special scrapbook. She filled it with pictures and ideas for her dream house, features she loved like a large yard and a pretty porch. We spent months searching for the perfect place that had everything she wanted, a place where we could relax and watch the sunset. But sometimes dreams don't turn out as expected. Sitting on that porch swing was more blinding than relaxing, so we had to get window coverings. That big yard needed constant work, so I had to buy a riding mower. If I picked a cheap one, it would break easily and need repairs. If I chose something better, we struggled to afford it due to constant home repairs. The house was large but poorly insulated, making our heating bills sky high. Even after updating everything, it turned into more of a money pit than a perfect home. In the end, Melanie wanted something different. After our divorce, I heard she sold the house and moved away, leaving me with memories and my girls. All the hard work I put into the house felt wasted. She found someone else, someone new to care for her. From what I gathered, she was discovering that life with him wasn't quite as ideal as she had hoped. As I drove down the country road to the house, the sun was just starting to rise. A car passed me, likely on its way to work, and then I saw my old home. Waves of memories flooded back. Happy picnics with the girls, birthday parties, and cozy nights around the fire. Many of these memories felt distant because I had spent too much time focused on my work. Now, looking back, I realized those hours spent writing programs didn't bring me joy. My home was gone, my job was gone, and so were Melanie and the girls. I found myself parked across the street, just staring at the house when I noticed some movement. A big dog had been let out, and soon after a man in his 50s came out to roll the trash cans to the curb. He looked like he worked hard for his family. The dog stayed close beside him. The man spoke first. "Can I help you, son?" His tone seemed friendly, but hinted that I should move on. "Sir, I know you don't know me, but—" I must have said something amusing because he chuckled a bit at my reply. I took a moment to look at him and wonder why he was laughing. My confusion didn't seem to bother him. Perhaps he was losing track of time in his age. I realized I might be on the same path. "With all due respect, sir, I don't mean any harm." His reaction showed a little doubt about me. I figured my tattoos didn't help my case. I pointed to the house and said, "I used to live here about 10 years ago, but things went downhill. Now I'm just trying to understand it all. I promise I won't take anything away but a memory." He looked me up and down. I held my ground as I felt his judging gaze. Despite that, he spoke kindly. "How long were you away, son?" It took a moment for me to find an answer. Part of me wanted to just ride away on my bike. Who did he think he was? Still, I was taught to show respect to my elders, so I kept it short and said, 5 years. "Why don't you go see your parole officer?" It sounded more like an order than a suggestion. He clearly wanted to end our chat, and I understood that this was his home now. I was just visiting. Every broken heart can guide those on a rough path. I might be mixing up some lyrics, but that thought came to me as I got back on the open road. I felt lost and needed guidance. Many heartbreaks shaped where I stood today. And now, my world felt unsettled again, as the one person responsible for my troubles had returned. I needed some closure. While I was away, I couldn't make sense of what had happened. Most of my thoughts were filled with frustration towards one person, and not being able to see my daughters only made those feelings worse. A professional would probably say that was not a healthy way to cope. Playing guitar helped me feel better for a while, but it didn't truly change my feelings. Underneath, I still felt a lot of anger waiting for the next challenge. Maybe it was time to follow this troubled road back to where it started. But first, I needed to make a call. I checked my phone and saw that I had missed a call from my parole officer. I hadn't spoken with him in a couple of years. I found it odd that the older man suggested I see my parole officer right before he called me. He must have reported me. I'd listen to that voicemail later. Hopefully I wouldn't have any issues before then. Brett answered the phone, still half asleep. "Hello? I promised you an open mic day. You'd better get ready." I couldn't catch most of what she said after that. I think she was talking to the neighbor's dogs. The sounds she made were so high-pitched that only dogs might understand her, but at least she was awake. "You should call Bear, too. We'll probably need his fiddle depending on the songs." I wasn't sure if she heard me, but I felt it was important to mention. She was very spontaneous, but sometimes a little planning could help us succeed. It reminded me of a wise saying. If country singers wanted to perform in Texas, they needed to have a fiddle in their band. I was sure Austin could be substituted for Nashville. Next on my list was dealing with the uneasy feeling I had since she arrived to tell me about Abby. Fortunately, I knew where she was staying from overhearing her chat with Brett. I didn't want Brett to know I was going to see Melanie. This was my business, and Melanie had to deal with it. Besides, I'd made her happy with the open mic night. I wasn't clueless. At the hotel, I asked the front desk to let Melanie know I was there. I just wanted the room number, but they said that wasn't allowed. So much for a surprise. This wasn't about playing games. I needed to speak to her as a rational adult. When she answered the door looking worried, it didn't help my focus. She let me in, concern showing on her face. We hadn't heard from Abby, and she was still missing. "Have you heard anything?" I shook my head. All of my contacts were reliable and would have let me know if they had seen her. Unless Abby found herself in trouble, I didn't think any of them had spotted her. In a way, that was good news. Her mood brightened as she grabbed her phone. Allie sent me some pictures that Abby took last night. She showed me her phone with the images. Before I could look closely, she said, "She went by the old house, Steve." I scrolled through the photos. Sure enough, they showed the old house from the inside and outside. Abby often thought about her childhood. She remembered her bedroom, the big living room where they had many gatherings, and the backyard. One memory stood out. When they had new concrete put on the back patio, Abby and Allie made handprints in it before it dried. Just thinking about it made my eyes water, but I held back the tears. I could only manage to ask, Why? Melanie stepped back as if she understood that my question had a deeper meaning. She wrapped her arms around herself, looking worried about how I might react. In a gentle voice, she said, "I felt alone." Then she quickly added, "I'm not blaming you. I know I ended the marriage, but please let me share how I felt." I managed to keep my emotions in check. I sensed a struggle within me, but I didn't come here to argue. Her silence seemed to encourage her to keep going. "You were always working. Even when you were home, you were on the computer. I understand we had bills to pay and you were trying to help us, but it still hurt because you weren't really there. After spending the day with the kids, I wanted to feel like more than just a mom. I wanted to feel like a wife again. The little time I had with you was spent on serious topics like money and chores. I know that must have felt like nagging, and you didn't need that. You were already stressed, but I felt like I went from being Melanie the mommy to Melanie the nag and lost Melanie the wife and woman." I couldn't help myself. "But you found it with him?" Melanie tensed, but she stood firm. Maybe she thought I would lash out, or perhaps she just expected it. One day I decided to take a break and went to a coffee shop. I enjoyed watching the students walk in and out. That's when I met Doug. He stood out with his nice suit. He was easy to talk to, and I felt comfortable discussing things beyond daily life. He was smart, funny, and paid attention to me. I could see that my reaction showed how hurt I was. He reminded me of you before we got married. At first, we just talked. But then he said he'd come to the coffee shop regularly to see me, and it made me feel special. For the first time in a long time, someone wanted to spend time with me. I told myself it was just friendly conversation, but I looked forward to those coffee dates. "I'll skip the details," she continued, "but those coffee dates turned into something more. After the first time," her voice shook with emotion, "I felt guilty. I thought it was a mistake that I could fix. I wanted to be the best wife for you, but you hardly noticed me. Some days I felt like I could walk into your office and you'd still be too focused on work. I wanted your attention, but you were always busy. It was so much easier to be with Doug than to wait for you." I couldn't hold back my anger. "For better or worse, in sickness and health. Did those words mean nothing to you?" she cried. "They meant everything, but you were too caught up in your work. You paid more attention to that than to me. I tried to get the kids to help, wanting you to notice how much we all needed you." "Yes, I know we needed money and you worked hard, but I needed the husband I fell in love with. When you weren't there, Doug was—" She fell onto her bed, crying into her hands. Inside me, anger simmered, but I held back. I despised her actions. "Why didn't you say something? I couldn't read your mind. How was I supposed to know that he was there for you in ways I wasn't? No, don't think that. You were a good provider. Everyone always wishes for more, but we weren't in such bad shape." I turned away from her, unable to look as I spoke. "But he gave you what you needed to feel cherished." She gave a small, bitter laugh. I had heard this kind of sentiment before, often directed at friends who bragged about their lives. But she saw through it all. Don't get her started on people bragging about how adorable their babies are, or how amazing their kids are when, really, they aren't cute at all or very impressive. "The guy couldn't even satisfy a toy," she joked. I couldn't help but laugh a little. It was funny, but I didn't want to linger on it. I glanced at her. She was looking out the balcony window, not at me. After a short while, she looked down at her hands, playing with her wedding ring. But it was better than what I was getting at home. She closed her eyes and spoke softly. "If I had known then what I do now, I would have tried harder." Then she turned to face me. "I'm sorry, Steve. You deserved more. You deserved better." I could hear the hurt in her voice. "I hope that woman brings you joy. You deserve happiness." I decided to be polite and sat down next to her. She placed a comforting hand on her own leg and squeezed it gently. "So, why did you come all the way down here, Mel? You could have just called." She took my hand and looked directly into my eyes. "Doug didn't want anything to do with Abby. She wasn't his daughter. I was worried sick and he didn't seem to care. I came here because I needed someone who understood." I wasn't lying when I said that Doug and Abby just didn't get along. Abby rebelled against him. Although they were his stepdaughters, I think he didn't expect how difficult it would be. He loved me, but not the girls. He wanted to send them to boarding school for a better education. When I insisted they could go to schools near home, he agreed but did little to help. While Abby pushed back, Allie just followed her dad's lead. If she wasn't reading, she was on the computer. They both made excuses to go to friends' houses when they could. As the arguments between Abby and Doug grew worse, his love for me started to fade. He wanted me to control her and discipline her. When I refused, he began to realize that the girls were more than just burdens. They were part of my life. He started looking elsewhere. We'd go out, and he'd check out the waitress or the hostess. I shouldn't have been surprised. After all, he didn't respect my marriage to you, so why would I expect him to respect the vows we made? She looked down again. I started seeing my flaws. I felt like a bad mother for putting my daughters through so much and for being with a man who didn't care for them like their father. I felt like a terrible wife for giving up on the man I truly loved. I felt I was losing myself because I couldn't keep my husband from looking at other women. I began working out to lose weight and considered getting implants to compete with younger women. I didn't understand what was the point if I divorced Doug. I had put my girls through a lot because I didn't find my strength. No, I promised myself I would make it work with Doug. I did some things I'm not proud of. I started dressing more to gain his approval, which is what I now see he wanted. I even dyed my hair blonde because he liked it. Abby always told me it was a mistake, and maybe she was right. I lost confidence in my choices. I relied on him to make me feel better about myself. Deep down, I cheered for Abby when she clashed with Doug. I wished I were like her, that I could have fought harder. I had failed once at marriage. I didn't want to fail again. When she ran away, she found a way to escape what living with the Harpers had become. I admired her courage and wished I could do the same. I wanted Allie to come too, but I wasn't sure if I was being responsible or selfish by coming down here. Honestly, I didn't know what I would find here. Part of me hoped you still cared for Abby, even if... She stopped herself and squeezed my hand again. I had no idea you were sending cards, Steve. Really, I let Doug take care of everything at home. It was his house, after all. I was just there to make him look good. If you want, I could personally deliver those cards for you. Well, at least for Allie. Abby can get hers when we find her. I couldn't tell if she needed to share all this, but I listened to her words. It made me think about everything she said. I wasn't sure who was truly struggling more. Yes, I faced time away and had to start fresh, but it seemed like Melanie was stuck in her own situation. Her visit to Nashville felt less like freedom and more like a search for relief. Plus, it seemed Allie would always pull her back home. I no longer wanted to see her suffer. I didn't want to dwell on her struggles. She recognized the choices she made and seemed to regret them all. The part of me that wanted to comfort her came out, but another part still felt anger. Well, say something, she pleaded, her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know what to say, so I pulled her into an embrace. She wrapped her arms around me tightly as if seeking solace, hoping I would be there for her. I couldn't promise anything about hope. Too much had happened. But for now, she needed someone strong to lean on, and I could be that support. My quiet hug spoke volumes. She rested her face against my chest and began to cry. I held her gently, running my fingers through her hair. I whispered softly, "We will find Abby, and everything will be okay." She hugged me tighter, not wanting this moment to end. Oddly, I felt the same way, even though this was the woman who had caused me so much trouble. I had been in prison because of her. I suddenly remembered a voicemail from my parole officer and released my hold on Melanie. Her look of disappointment tugged at my heart as she gazed up at me, her eyes filled with worry. "Wait, Mel. I just remembered something. I'm not leaving." I stood up from the bed and moved toward the door, hoping for a moment of space between us. She didn't need to hear what my parole officer had to say. I played back the message. "Steve, this is Officer Veers. A young lady is here who wants to talk to you." "Hi, Papa. I'm in town. Can you—" I felt a rush of excitement when I heard Abby's voice, but then felt frustrated as my phone died just then. I muttered under my breath, wishing my phone hadn't quit on me. Melanie noticed and looked concerned as she approached me. I was overwhelmed, struggling between hearing Abby's voice and dealing with my ex-wife. During our embrace, Melanie adjusted her robe, realizing it had slipped. She quickly pulled it together again, looking a bit embarrassed. I wanted to say, "You don't need to worry about that because I'm here." But instead it came out as, Abby left me a message, but my phone died. Can I use yours? Melanie's face lit up. Her smile could brighten any room. It was great to see her so happy after everything. She handed me her phone without hesitation. She'll think it's me calling her and she might not answer, I said, trying to keep the tone light as I started to type. I sent just 2 words to Abby. Baby girl? The phone started ringing right away. Papa? Is that you? Tears filled my eyes from joy. If she was my baby girl, then I was her papa, not dad or anything else. Melanie leaned in closer, putting her arms around me as she listened. I wrapped an arm around her, replying, Yes, baby girl, it's me. But Abby's excitement faded a bit. Why are you using Mom's phone? Are you in Chicago? No, my phone died, so I'm using your mother's. Didn't you get her messages? I deleted them all. She's just a voice for... She mocked, saying, Doug. I squeezed Melanie gently to comfort her. Abby, your mother came to Nashville because she was really worried about you. To drag me back to Chicago. Papa, I don't want to go back. I'm 18 now. I can make my own choices. I want to be down here with you. I cleared my throat, considering how odd it could be if my daughter came to stay with me and my friend. Plus, my ex-wife had hardly recognized me when she saw me after all those years. How would Abby deal with my new appearance? I tried to sound stern and said, We can discuss that when we see you. Where are you? Do we need to come get you? Will she be there? Abby didn't hide her feelings about her mother. Who do you mean? Doug's little princess? It was clear Melanie heard this. She stepped away, looking out the window, her expression distant. The situation made her feel isolated, caught between her past relationship and her concern for Abby. She had her reasons, but didn't think about how they affected others. Now, she was facing the consequences of her choices. No, it will just be me, I said, pausing as I thought about what would happen next. With a caring tone, I added, But she is still your mother. She came because she was worried about you. Abby sighed. Okay. With a lighter tone, I asked again, So where are you? I'll come get you, and then we can go out for lunch. I'm starving. I tried not to look at Melanie too much. I didn't want to gloat. I'm on Murfreesboro Pike, heading to the Southern. They say they have the best oysters ever. I've never tried them before. It sounds fun. I turned back to Melanie. Who is we? Who are you with? This caught Melanie's attention. She whispered, She's with someone? Oh yeah, Papa. When I left Officer Veer's office, I met this guy. I think he's a lawyer or something. She paused, and I could hear the distant sound of wind on the line. Yes, he's a lawyer, she giggled while talking to me. He thought I was a kid in trouble. When I told him I was looking for you, he offered to take me to lunch and help me find you. The U.S. military has 5 levels of alertness. You might remember them from the movie War Games. My dad's alert level was at the lowest, DEFCON 5, until she mentioned the lawyer from the Tennessee office. Don't get me wrong, there are many good probation lawyers in Nashville, but it's strange for a lawyer to approach an 18-year-old girl coming out of a probation office and ask about her past. This made me uneasy, lowering my alert level to DEFCON 4. When this lawyer offered to take my daughter to lunch at a fancy place, my alert level jumped to DEFCON 3. In my serious, protective voice, I asked, What's this lawyer's name? Felipe Jensen, known in some circles as Phil. He's known for using charm to get what he wants, and I'd heard that some women who worked with him had to make difficult choices to get better results. It's hard to say how he keeps his license. He's a danger pretending to be a hero. The fact that he was taking my daughter to lunch made me feel very uncomfortable, pushing my alert level to DEFCON 2. Okay, baby girl, I'll meet you at the Southern in about 15 minutes, I said. Then I added, Don't accept any drinks from him. If you need to use the restroom, get a new drink. Papa, just trust me. I'll see you soon, baby girl. I took a moment and added something I hadn't said in a long time. I love you, Abby. I love you too, Papa. Before I could hang up, Melanie looked at me with concern. What's wrong? Is she okay? Abby is with someone I'm worried about, heading to the Southern for lunch. Luckily, it's close by. I'm coming with you. I stopped her. Stay here. I left the house with urgency. If I hurried, I could catch them before they went inside. There was construction nearby, so traffic would slow them down. Even though I was worried about my daughter, the 5-minute walk gave me time to think. Abby had only met this man because she had gone to the probation office. If I weren't an ex-con, she wouldn't have had to deal with him at all. I shouldn't blame myself, but I did. If Abby came to live with me, what kind of life would I introduce her to? Would it be good for her? I used to feel proud of who I was, but now I wondered what kind of role model I could be for her. Navigating through buildings and construction, I arrived just in time to see Abby getting out of a nice car. This man acted as if she was just another trophy, showing her off like a status symbol. The way he treated her fueled my anger, but I waited for the traffic light to cross the street. It gave me a moment to calm down. I counted to 10, more than once. When I walked in, I saw Abby and the man were already seated. He looked smooth, choosing a seat that faced the restaurant. He probably wanted to see if trouble was coming. Luckily for him, he was in a public place, and I didn't want to cause a scene, especially with a lawyer, though part of me was tempted to. I told the hostess I was late and needed to join my party. As soon as I placed my hand on Abby's shoulder, the man spoke up. "Can I help you?" Abby looked surprised, clearly not recognizing me. She turned to the man for guidance. "I'm just here to get my daughter," I said. Abby's face lit up with joy. She jumped up, accidentally knocking over a glass of water, which interrupted the man's demeanor. She hugged me tightly and exclaimed, "Papa!" "Hey, Abby," I said, smiling wide with happiness. I put my arm around her and glanced at the man. "Thank you for bringing my daughter to me safely. I think I can handle this from here," he said with a hint of frustration as he wiped his suit and headed to the bathroom, grumbling, "Yeah, whatever." "Oh my gosh, Dad, is that really you? You look—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Different. Grow a beard and I might start calling you Walter." Not quite understanding, I tilted my head. "Is that a good thing? Is it like being the Marlboro Man?" Here we were, 2 generations apart, making references that the other might not understand. Yet this was a clear reminder that Abigail Brooks was indeed my daughter. She looked so much like her mother. Abby carried herself with more confidence than Melanie ever did. She had a sense of style, while Melanie tended to avoid what was popular back then. I was thankful Melanie didn't let social pressure change her too much, even though, like many girls her age, she had her go-to hairspray. Abby nodded, but her gaze fell to my hands. Should I keep my hands down? Again, I felt awkward around my daughter. I quickly moved my hands under the table, hiding them. I stammered before explaining, "It's a habit from my past." "It's okay, Dad. I've seen that show." "I understand," she said kindly, referencing something I didn't know. Reluctantly, I lifted my hands for her to see the tattoos. She examined them with curiosity. To her, my past seemed intriguing, almost like a story from a movie. She gently traced the letter D with her thumb and looked up at me expectantly. "It's a reminder," I said softly. "When I knock you down in a match, just stay down so you don't get hurt more. I won't hold back if you get back up." "Do people really get back up?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. "Only those who ignore the warning signs," I replied with a sigh. She then looked closer at the 5 dots on my right hand, running her thumb over them as if expecting them to feel different. "1 dot for every year I was away," I explained before she could ask. She turned my hands over, noticing how rough they were now compared to how they used to be. With my hands spread out in front of her, she could see the lines of my tattoo sleeves. She pushed my leather jacket sleeves up to see more. On my left wrist, Abigail was tattooed in flowing letters, and on my right, Allison were written the same way. Her eyes lit up at seeing her name and that of her sister. "I never stopped thinking about you, sweetheart." "I know, Dad. I figured Doug and—" Here she mimicked a sing-song tone. "Doug's little princess." Then she dropped back to her serious voice. "We're scared of you." Curious, I asked, "What's been happening?" She rolled her eyes. "Doug is such a jerk, Dad. You should have stood up to him." While part of me felt Doug deserved it, I regretted my actions. He ended up with the girl while I lost so much. I took a deep breath and said, "Getting aggressive didn't fix anything. If I had gone further, I might not be here with you now. But Dad, he ruined everything. He tricked us into leaving our home and friends to live with him. Mom just went along with it. She left everything behind for Doug. She may not want to be a Brooks anymore, but I will never be that stuck-up girl. They can take the girl from the country, but they can't take the country out of the girl. Dad, you won't believe it. Mom changed completely for him. She dyed her hair and did all this stuff to look different. It's like she became a totally different person. I chuckled a little at that. Abby had a fiery spirit. I tried to suppress my laughter with a cough, knowing she struck a chord with me. But I still worried if my home was the right place for her. So what's next for you? You're 18 now. It's time to think about your future. Abby shrugged, looking more like a child than an adult. I don't know. I thought you'd help me figure it out. I clicked my tongue and said, let's talk about your choices. She seemed to perk up at that. I reached for the ketchup bottle and placed it aside. Option A, you finished high school and going to college is a good idea, but I know you don't want to stay up north. There are plenty of colleges in Nashville, or you could go to UT. Seeing her frown, I realized she might be struggling with her studies because of everything at home. Quickly, I grabbed the salt shaker and placed it next to the ketchup. Option B, you could move to Nashville and live with me. This got a nod of approval from her. But if you do that, you'll need to help with the rent. You're an adult now. Paying rent and bills is no longer something you can avoid. I can find a job, Abby replied. Doing what? What skills do you have that would make someone want to hire you? Abby shrugged a little. I could work as a waitress or something. She looked down. It sounds like you don't want me here, Papa. I shook my head. I wanted her here more than anything, but I worried I wasn't the right person for her. I just want you to think about it carefully. We've all made choices in our lives. I made a choice and had to deal with what happened next. Your mother made a choice, and now she has to handle the results. If you want to live here because you're now an adult, you need to accept the consequences of that decision. I'm not saying you can't find a job, but should we be thinking about the short term or the long term? I picked up the pepper shaker and put it next to the salt shaker. You can't have one without the other. If you come here, then Allie would be left all alone in Skokie. Is that really what you want? To leave her behind? I want her to come too. She doesn't like it there any more than I do. She hides in her room with all those books. I know she would be happy living here with you. I shook my head again. You're an adult now, she is not. Your mother has full custody of her. I can't take her away from her mother. That would get me in serious trouble, and I don't think any of us want that. She could ask for a way to be on her own. Usually, parents shouldn't laugh at serious moments, especially with their children. I loved Abby dearly and didn't correct her. I understood what she meant. For that, she'd need a lawyer. Do you have money for a lawyer? Well, what about the lawyer you had? The one who helped you? I chuckled a bit. You know I lost that case and served time in prison. I don't think you want to use that lawyer. She started to say something, but I raised my hand to pause her. Yes, there are some lawyers who help for free. It's possible, but pretty unlikely. And even if you find one, Allie would still need to stay in Chicago until it all goes through. Her shoulders drooped, feeling let down by the difficulties of that option. But then I surprised her by moving the regular ketchup bottle into the mix and saying, "Here's another idea." She perked up, curious about what this new option could be. You should talk to your mother and encourage her to stand up for herself and reconsider her situation. Abby, your mother admires you very much. You are a lot like her when she was your age. I think she wishes she could relive those days, but she's hesitant about making a choice that could lead to uncertainty. She needs support, and right now the only one she relies on is him. If she does decide to move on, Allie can accompany her wherever she goes. Abby smiled for a moment, then said, You do realize there's a conflict of interest when you give Mom advice on her personal life. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled, looking at her seriously. Yes, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. Have I mentioned how much I love my daughter? She's definitely a lot like me. When she was younger, we used to play a game where I would quote a movie, and she would guess it. Back then, my quotes were mainly from Disney and Pixar movies. Now it seems she still enjoyed this game in her late teens. It looked like today's game was her quoting a movie, and me replying. You might recognize the scene from a movie with George Clooney and Brad Pitt. She changed the lines just a bit to fit our situation. Papa, are you really giving advice on Mom's personal life? She paused and tilted her head to one side, her eyes narrowing. Why do you care about Mom? And that's the big question. Many feelings rushed through my mind as I thought about Melanie. Anger and hurt filled my thoughts. We had good times despite our issues. When we got married, we believed we were meant for each other. She was my partner and I was hers, but things didn't go the way we hoped. I was left feeling vulnerable because of the choices she made. Despite the pain, I want to help her. Maybe I feel a duty to look out for her. I could convince myself it's because she's the mother of my daughters, but I think there's more. While I wouldn't say it's love in the romantic sense, I still care about her well-being. Maybe the word is care, but why? Why do I care? She isn't here because of me. She's here for her daughter. If Abby hadn't run away, she would still be in Chicago where she belongs. But Melanie said she wanted to be more like Abby, and Abby came to Nashville to meet me. Is that what I want? I have changed. I'm not the Steve she married. She's not the Melanie I married. So much is different now. Maybe this change in us could let us start fresh. But again, why would I do that? I don't think she has changed. I worry that she would disappoint me, just like I felt let down before. Honestly, I would want nothing more than to turn the tables. But would that make me the bad guy? Maybe some of my thoughts come from desire. The new Melanie is in her 40s but looks much younger. When we were together, we shared something special. This new Melanie? Well, she is different. It almost seems inappropriate to think of her that way after everything that has happened. Oh dear. And then there's Brett. Papa? I shook my head and smiled at Abby. She's your mother, sweetheart. No matter how you feel about her, she's a part of you. I can't love you without still having some feelings for her. Abby squinted at me, trying to understand. Even if she didn't say it, her face seemed to doubt my answer. That's all right. I still don't know the truth myself. But this is not just about me. We're focusing on you and your choices. Option A, go to college. Option B, you come live with me. Option C, you go back home with your mother. And before you choose, sit down with her for a talk. The issues I have with her are ours, but she will always be your mother, and there will come a time when you'll need her. She's the only one you have. Nice way to change the subject, Papa, she said with a smirk. Her shoulders dropped a little as she nodded. But maybe you're right. No, maybe about it. I know I'm right. It's the perks of being a single dad. I'm no longer tied to the idea that I must please everyone. I can be correct if I want. I took a moment to glance around the restaurant. A waitress was kindly keeping her distance to let us have our father-daughter time. I looked past her for any sign of the person we didn't want to see. He might have slipped out during our talk or is still in the restroom. If I were to guess, I'd say he left the restaurant. Too bad, because I was hoping he'd pay for our meal. This isn't exactly a place I can afford easily. I stood up, making Abby get up with me. She looked puzzled when I pulled out my wallet and placed a $5 bill on the table, even though we hadn't ordered anything. I made sure the server knew that the tip was for her since she let us have our conversation without interrupting. Come on, your mother is worried about you. We can order room service at the hotel, I said to Abby, leaving out that the meal would be covered by the other guy's money. Abby pouted for a bit, but I gently let her out. On our way back to the hotel, I said, "Oh, and later you and your mom can join me and Brett for—" I stopped since I didn't know where we were going to be. Some music event later. I'll text you as soon as I find out the details. Abby raised an eyebrow and asked, Brett? Then she hesitated and added, Did things change for you in prison? Before I could answer, she quickly added, Not that it matters. I'm totally fine with who you are. Her question caught me off guard. I had to think about it. Brett isn't a guy, so why would she ask me that? I chuckled when it finally clicked. Oh no, Brett is a woman. Abby laughed. You should have just said you were seeing someone, Papa. I want to meet her. I rubbed the back of my neck, unsure how to explain Brett to Abby. I can barely explain it to myself. Here's this young woman, only a little older than my daughter, and we have our own kind of connection. For many men, this could seem like a dream come true. But for me, it's complicated. Brett feels more like a friend, even though we share certain things. I genuinely care for her, as she understands who I am and lets me be myself. Yet, I suspect my feelings are influenced by how different our ages are. You will get to meet her. Sometimes we play music together at open mic nights. She's really talented, and I think you'll love her. Wait? You're in a band? That's amazing. I have to come live with you now. I've been playing the guitar since I was little. Remember when you bought me my first guitar? I still play every chance I get. I had to laugh at her excitement. It showed how much she is like me. I hope you don't mean that toy guitar, I joked. Then I grew concerned. Or the one from that video game. Abby playfully punched me on the arm, laughing. No, not those. It's that beginner 6-string guitar. Anyway, I'll message you when I have more details. Once I arrived at the Omni, I gave Melanie's phone to Abby and told her which room Melanie was in. Of course, there was some pushback about me not going up to see her. I explained that I had been out all night and really needed a nap before the show. I didn't want to mess things up for Brett. That seemed to calm Abby down. We hugged. Even though I wanted to get home, I didn't want to let go of my daughter. I worried that this reunion might be short. She gave me a warm smile and said, I'll see you later tonight, Papa. I can't wait to see you all perform. Then she happily bounced away. I wasn't sure what she was expecting. It's not like we were playing at a big venue. Ah, the excitement of youth. It must be contagious because when I got home, Brett was just as full of energy as Abby. I barely got the keys out of my hand when she jumped on me in a big hug. I felt her warmth and enthusiasm envelop me. She greeted me with a bright smile. I made a note to stock up on soup and drinks if this relationship was going to continue, not that I was complaining. Well, hello to you too. In a high-pitched voice, she said, We're playing at the Benchmark. I was a bit confused. I thought we might be at the Douglas Corner Cafe since they usually have open mic nights. Still, in a way, I was relieved we weren't at the place with a name that reminded me of someone unpleasant. They don't do open mic nights there, I said, aware my tone sounded unsure. I know, but a band canceled at the last minute and I managed to get us in. Can you believe it? I called Bear to bring his fiddle and Mac will play the drums. I've been working on the songs we'll perform. It was a lot to take in. She spoke so fast that it took me a moment to comprehend her excitement. The Benchmark was a lively bar downtown, but it wasn't a huge stage. Still, I figured moving from singing a few songs to doing a full set would be a big thrill for Brett. I just needed to keep her away from too much sugar. That's fantastic, hon. I can only imagine how busy it will be with the CMA Music Fest starting tomorrow. Her face lit up at that thought. She looked genuinely surprised. You know, a lot of country music fans will be arriving tonight and will be hitting the bars to experience the music scene before the festival, right? Oh no, oh no, oh no! She started fanning herself, clearly overwhelmed. I really needed to keep her away from sugary drinks and treats. All right, you focus on the song list. I'm going to take a quick nap so I can stay awake for our performance. No! You have to help me with the playlist! This is my chance! No, I need to rest. You'll do great. It'll be just like when we go camping with friends, only instead of a campfire, we'll be at a bar. I snapped my fingers. Oh, and I should text Abby where we'll be performing. When I mentioned Abby, Brett seemed to realize there was more happening than just her plans. I understood, though. She had been away from the music scene for a while. We occasionally did an open mic night, but nothing like this. It felt like she was getting a second chance just as the city prepared for the festival. You found her? She came closer, her eyes wide with curiosity. I nodded as I walked over to my phone charger. Yes, she's with her mom right now. I thought they needed to have a good talk before deciding what to do next. I gently touched her shoulder. But you have a song list to make, and I really need to rest. My phone buzzed to life, showing I had missed calls and messages. As much as I wanted to sleep, I was drawn to the updates from my phone. One missed call was from Brett, probably to share the excitement about tonight's performance, but the text messages were from Melanie. I hesitated to read them. It felt strange receiving messages from an ex while being with my current girlfriend, but I opened the message anyway. Steve, coming back home has been a blessing. Thank you for being here for me. When Abby ran away, it felt like everything was falling apart. I know you might not want to hear it, but I'm truly sorry for everything. I acted selfishly. I can't change the past, but I'm grateful you're here for me now, the way I should have been for you. I understand if you dislike me. I dislike myself too. Well, Abby wants to talk. Thank you for bringing her home. I was going to text Abby about the show tonight, but I thought a more friendly gesture might be better. I'm performing at the Benchmark Bar and Grill tonight at 8 p.m. It's on 2nd Avenue between the Hard Rock Cafe and Wild Horse Saloon. Why don't you and Abby join us? I'll save 2 seats for you. I didn't wait for a reply. She should focus on Abby, and I needed to get some rest. The Country Music Awards in Nashville feels as exciting as the big Christmas tree lighting in New York City. The streets on 2nd Avenue were filled with people, just like during a holiday on a Friday. The Benchmark Bar and Grill was overflowing with guests. People were standing everywhere, and the tables were full. We were set up at the front so our music would be heard inside and outside the bar. Brett picked all the best songs for our set, including some of her own. The crowd was lively, and she connected with them easily. It was as if she hadn't taken a break from performing at all. She sang classics like Mercedes-Benz by Janis Joplin and Jolene by Dolly Parton, plus some current hits like Our Song by Taylor Swift and Girl Crush by Little Big Town. Each song showcased her talent and the band's skills, too. Her time away seemed to have deepened her love for music. About halfway through our set, I saw Abby and Melanie arrive. Luckily, the seats I reserved were close to the stage. Abby looked nice, dressed for Nashville in a relaxed flannel shirt, a white tank top, and well-fitted jeans. Her cowboy boots and a fun cowboy hat completed her look. She seemed very cheerful, and I found myself playing my guitar a little more proudly, hoping to impress her. The joy in her eyes made me smile. Melanie, however, wore something quite different from what I would expect. Her dress fit snugly, catching everyone's attention. It had a big zipper down the back, and she kept adjusting it, making sure she felt comfortable. She wore knee-high leather boots, too. I wondered if she had altered her style for this occasion. Brett noticed my change in mood when Melanie and Abby took their seats. After finishing our song, Brett looked at Melanie with a certain expression that made me nervous. I half-joked to myself about silly things, but then I focused back on the performance when Brett said, "This next song goes out to someone special." She whispered to me that she was changing the playlist. When she named the song, I knew right away who she was thinking of. I loved playing that song, so I started the intro riff, and I could see Abby and Melanie truly listening. Abby had that look of realization, seeing a different side of me, while Melanie seemed deep in thought, taking in every word. I had a dream about a burning house you were stuck inside. I couldn't get you out. I laid beside you and pulled you close. And the two of us went up in smoke. Love isn't all that it seems. I did you wrong. I'll stay here with you until this dream is gone. As I glanced at Abby, she was joyfully singing along, soaking in the concert vibe. But Melanie's expression caught my attention. It was as if she was hearing the lyrics for the first time. Our eyes met, and in the dim light it seemed like tears were in her eyes. I could be mistaken, but there was a lot of feeling there. It reminded me of the emotions she shared in her messages. Perhaps her regret had calmed the storm inside me. That made me wonder, did Brett read my texts while I was asleep? Maybe it was just a coincidence. Brett knew about the troubles between me and Melanie. She didn't write the song Burning House by Cam, but she chose it as a dedication. It made me realize that younger people sometimes struggle with privacy in texting. I have to admit, navigating these things feels a bit overwhelming for me. Maybe this is why I shouldn't get involved with someone so much younger than me. When the band took a break, I decided to stay. I noticed Brett looked a bit unsure, but she walked over to the restrooms. On her way, a man in a jacket pulled her aside. I wasn't sure what was happening, but I had my own plans. I started playing a song by Jimmy Buffett, and it seemed to make the crowd happy. I wasn't sure if Melanie noticed I was singing to her, but I looked directly at her when I sang these lines. "Oh, yesterdays are behind me, so I can't look back for too long. There's so much to see right ahead of me, and I know I'm on the right path with these changes in direction, changes in mood. Nothing stays the same with all my running and all my planning. If I couldn't laugh, I'd just lose my mind. If we couldn't laugh, we'd just lose our minds. If we weren't all a bit crazy, we'd lose our minds." When Brett came back, she seemed genuinely joyful. I didn't know if it was because of the break or the man in the jacket, but the energy of the evening felt different. It seemed like Brett forgot all about Melanie. Whatever sparked her excitement, the next few songs really got the crowd moving. Even Melanie looked like she was enjoying herself by the time we wrapped up. After we said goodbye to everyone and started packing up, I gave Brett a curious look. She pulled me aside, all smiles. "A producer wants to help us with our next album. He thinks we could be really successful. He has everything planned." I wasn't so sure about it. There was no hiding my doubt. especially after how I had first met Brett. Music producers came and went, just like musicians in Nashville. Some producers could be less than trustworthy, and I wasn't going to get my hopes up. Stoney, this guy is serious. He remembered me from a year ago. He said he's been searching for me, and now that he's found me, he really wants to help us. I sighed, looking down. Touring and concerts weren't my thing. I loved playing music just for fun, like around a campfire. I looked back at Brett and asked, "Are you sure this is what you want?" "Stoney, you know this is my dream." I nodded, knowing that Brett was always eager to chase her dreams. "Then you should go for it." She picked up on my hesitation. "But you're not coming with me?" I shook my head with a slight smile. "I have too many responsibilities. I need to pay child support. That means I need a full-time job. Being on tour would mean traveling a lot, and I can't do that. Plus, I'm too old for that life." "You want to be with Melanie, don't you?" Her tone changed, and I saw a side of her I hadn't seen since her disagreement with Melanie. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, trying to stay calm. "You want to be with her. I saw your messages to her. I could tell how you were looking at her tonight. She's not good for you, Stoney. Well, I'm not going to stick around for that." She tried to walk away, but I gently took her arm, turning her back to me. I clenched my jaw before saying, "My daughters mean everything to me. I would do anything for them. My decision is only about them, nothing else." It hit me hard when I realized she had been reading my messages. "And why were you looking at my messages?" She shot back. "You left last night. You pushed me out of the way and just vanished. Did you meet up with her? I saw where she texted you." "Brett, you don't know what you're saying." "Fine, Stoney. Enjoy your life with her. She'll be moving on to someone else before you know it." I could tell she wanted to take her words back, but the anger had taken over. As she tried to recover, I wasn't interested in settling things anymore. I was done. "Brett, go. This is your chance." With that, I turned away. I knew she wanted to say something, but her aspirations were stronger than any disagreement with me. I had made a mistake by getting too close to someone much younger. She felt like a daughter to me. Speaking of daughters, I returned to the stage and found Melanie and Abby waiting for me. Abby rushed over and hugged me tightly. Melanie approached more slowly, her confidence clearly wavering. I made sure to keep Melanie in view as we talked. "Papa, that was amazing. You were all so great," Melanie added softly. "You really were wonderful. Brett is a talented singer." "Oh, wait, that's Brett? She's really young." Abby sounded a bit judgmental when she said this. I let Abby's comment linger because I wasn't ready to talk about our breakup yet. Instead, I turned to Melanie. "Looks like someone in the music industry agrees. I think she and the guys are off to sign a big deal." "You're not going to sign?" Melanie asked, looking puzzled. "Oh my God, Papa, you have to!" Abby exclaimed. I raised my hands as if to defend myself. "That's not for me. Besides, I have to think about paying child support. Jumping from one music gig to another and living in a van isn't stable. Maybe if I were younger, I'd consider it." "It would have been amazing, though, Papa." "Not everything that looks good is actually good, sweetheart." Melanie kept quiet, but I had a feeling she agreed with me. I decided to change the topic and asked, "So, I hope you two had a good talk?" Abby looked at Melanie, urging her to answer. "We decided that when we get home, we're going to have a family meeting and discuss our options." When Melanie referred to herself as part of our family, I felt a little flutter of happiness. Abby's face was full of pride, and she smiled widely. "I know what I want," Abby added quickly, interrupting her mom. "So do I," Melanie said, looking at me thoughtfully. Then she turned back to Abby. "But we can't just think about ourselves. We have to consider what Allie wants." She looked back at me. "And what your father wants." I shook my head and chuckled slightly. "I'm just happy to have at least one of my daughters back in my life. I'd love to have Allie too. But really, my opinion doesn't have to matter much. Whatever you all choose is fine by me." Since I didn't mention Allie directly, I noticed a hint of disappointment in Melanie's expression. She argued, "Of course your opinion matters, Steve. You're their dad." If I could read her mind, I could tell she wanted to say even more. Abby giggled. "Especially if I'm going to come live with you." I raised my hands again. "Let's not jump ahead, okay? You need to talk with Allie first. I'm sure we'll want to say in things." Melanie rolled her eyes. He can deal with it. When I get back to Skokie, I'm going to find the best divorce lawyers and see which one I like most. Plus, because of some rules, he won't be able to get any of them. I just don't want to uproot Allie from her school and friends without thinking about her feelings. Hearing Melanie speak up for herself made me proud. I thought, that's my girl. Melanie continued, if she's okay with it, I wanted to ask you if... Her voice trailed off as she stared at me. Abby looked back and forth between us and nudged her mom, urging her to continue. I was wondering if you would mind if we moved back to Nashville. She quickly added, just so the girls can be close to their dad. If that's all right, Steve, I don't want to intrude. You can say no. Her earlier confidence seemed to waver. Abby jumped in. And she wants to be in a relationship with you. Melanie shot back. He has a girlfriend. She then turned to me, her eyes pleading. But I hope we can be friends. Abby continued to speak her mind. Yeah, to a girl. Mom, he should be dating someone his age, not someone fresh out of high school. Then she looked at me and said, wow, Papa, did you take her to prom? I decided it was better to avoid discussing my breakup with Brett, so I took the easy route. I said, let's focus on your divorce first, then we can decide about everything else. If Abby wants to stay with me for the summer, that's fine. I have a spare room for her. And if after the divorce you want to move down here with Allie, that's okay too. If Allie doesn't want to leave her friends, that's fine as well. Now, as much as I'd hate to break up this happy moment, I need to get some sleep for work in the morning. You all have my number, so when you have your family meeting, just call me and we'll go from there. I'd suggest having the meeting after I finish work in the evening since I can't have my phone while I'm on the job. Melanie and Abby agreed. While Abby definitely showed her excitement about the future, Melanie seemed to leave with a hopeful attitude too. For me, I felt lost and just went with the flow of life, saying to myself, I take things as they come. Epilogue. It's been nearly 6 months since Abby's birthday. The summer flew by. Now, even a little snow has everyone in Nashville panicking. The stores are out of milk, eggs, sugar, and bread. I've never understood this rush. Unless they're making French toast during the snow, I don't see what the hurry is to stock up. The tourists haven't slowed down much, as the music scene here never really dies, especially when the Predators are playing at home. I convinced Abby that she needed more than just a high school education. I think working at a local restaurant over the summer opened her eyes to the reality of living off tips, especially after getting a few parking tickets while trying to work there. She is studying at Nashville State Community College, working towards a certificate for being an administrative assistant. This program lasts 1 year and teaches her how to write reports, create presentations, and handle other office tasks. At first, she didn't want to go to school and thought it was pointless, but I made it clear that living with me meant she had responsibilities. She had to help pay her share of the rent, utilities, and groceries. I told her I was her father, not just a friend. If she wanted to be treated like an adult, she needed to act like one. I also wanted her to meet friends who were focused on their futures instead of just having fun. I worried that she might get carried away with dreams of becoming famous, like a singer. After one visit to a karaoke bar, she quickly learned that many people in Nashville were trying to succeed in music, and it wasn't a simple path. Despite the serious aspects, we enjoyed fun times together. In late October and early November, some friends and I went camping. We would gather around the campfire and share laughter and stories. Abby cherished these moments. We would play music together. I had to keep an eye on my friends, as some weren't the best influences. Luckily, the reputation of my past made sure anyone thinking of acting out behaved themselves. Occasionally, Abby brought a date along, but the knowledge of my past kept the boys in check. My other daughter, Allie, was happy that Melanie was finally leaving her difficult marriage. However, her excitement faded when Melanie mentioned moving. Allie had made friends in Skokie, and leaving in her sophomore year wasn't something she wanted to do. The bright side was that she didn't have a steady boyfriend, so she didn't have to deal with those kinds of worries. Abby tried her best to encourage Allie to join her in Nashville. They agreed to start looking for a new life in Nashville once the school year ended, but Melanie made it clear that the move would happen no matter what. Melanie would call me from time to time with short updates. Sometimes she talked about her plans after her divorce, or she helped communicate between Allie and me since I hadn't seen Allie in a long time. If Allie remembered me, it was likely not good memories. Melanie acted as a bridge, coaching me on how to connect with Allie. Other times, Melanie would call to express her frustrations about her ex-husband, who was trying to prolong the divorce and even convince the judge to order therapy for them. For me, it was guys' night out. The factory was temporarily closed, so I finally had the weekend off. The Titans were away, and Abby was out with friends. I figured this meant she was on a date and didn't want me checking in on her. The Benchmark, a bar, was my favorite spot and the place to go tonight. It was crowded, and a singer was performing. He was okay, but didn't stand out in Nashville's music scene. I noticed a group of women who seemed to be enjoying their evening. They looked like they had been out for a while, judging by their outfits and energy. One woman wore a sash that said "Wild and Free Divorcee," which indicated they were celebrating. I decided it was time to settle my tab and leave. However, the woman in the divorcee sash caught my attention. She wore a striking red dress that fit her well but also drew attention for its style. I didn't want to stare, so I looked away, unsure if she was as attractive as she seemed. When the guitarist announced he was taking a break, the women expressed their disappointment but quickly turned to laughter. I continued to drink my beer, starting to think that bringing someone home might not be the best idea. Just as I was about to leave, the bartender handed me another drink and mentioned it was from the group of women. Being polite, I accepted and acknowledged them with a smile. Steve? To my surprise, the woman in red was Melanie. I should have guessed it, but it still seemed unlikely that she would choose to celebrate her divorce in Nashville instead of Chicago. I got up and walked over to Melanie and her friends. "Looks like you all are having fun," I said to greet them. I could hear her friends whispering. The drinks they had were making them a bit loud. "Is that her ex?" "Her first one," one of them corrected. "She left him for Doug?" I stopped paying attention when Melanie stood up and put her hand on my arm. She leaned in for a hug, and I could smell her favorite perfume, which I liked a lot. I hugged her back. One of her friends moved my hand to rest on Melanie's waist. I don't think she noticed what happened. She did jump slightly when my hand touched her waist, but it seemed like a good reaction. Clearing her throat, she looked at her friends. "Everyone, this is Steve." She paused and turned to me. "Stoney, Steve?" It was clear she wasn't sure which name to use. I chuckled and clarified, "I'm Steve, but you can call me Stoney." She turned a bit so her back was to me while still holding my arm. It made me wrap my arm around her. Was she signaling to her friends that I was off limits? Not that I minded. Her friends didn't really catch my interest. Oddly, she also pressed against me a bit. "Stoney, this is Christine, Debbie, and Maggie." They all greeted me with hellos, along with some side comments. It seemed like the drinks were doing their job. I thought it was funny that it was Melanie's divorce party, and she seemed to be the only one clear-headed. Then again, she was from the South. Folks from up north couldn't always handle their drinks. Melanie faced me again. "It's official. I'm a free woman." She raised her left hand to show she didn't have a wedding ring. I smiled warmly. "I see that, Miss Pierce." Her friends cheered and celebrated. Just then, a waitress arrived with their drinks, causing another round of cheers. Amid the noise, Melanie corrected me. "Miss Brooks." She looked a bit serious, but then quickly added, "I thought it would be easier to keep the name that the girls know." I let it go and looked back at the stage. I addressed the group. "Here to hear some good music?" I winked at Melanie. "The band isn't as good as last time, but they're decent." Melanie nodded. "How's the band doing? Did they recover from losing their lead guitarist?" I shrugged. "Last I heard, she was 4 months pregnant." Melanie looked surprised and said, "Oh." I lifted her chin so she could see me as I explained. "The producer is the father. I think they're getting married. The others left the band. It became too complicated for them." Melanie's eyes sparkled as she replied, "Oh." She glanced at her friends. I wasn't an expert in girl talk, but it felt like they had some silent communication. After a moment, she said, "I think I need to go home." One of her friends, who I think was Debbie, exclaimed, "What? We just got here. This guy might be good." She pointed to the guitarist as he returned to the stage, but another friend nudged her. Christine added, "She's probably tired, but I wouldn't mind staying a little longer." Maggie agreed, "Yeah, the night is still young." Debbie looked confused and asked Melanie, "Are you sure? I can take her home. You three enjoy yourselves. I promise you'll like this guy. He's good." Then I turned to Melanie. "Where are you all staying?" Debbie broke in. Oh, we're at the Gaylord Opryland. The decorations are beautiful. All the trees are lit up. I'm so happy we're there. Melanie decided she had enough. She put her hands on my chest and looked up at me. It felt like she was asking for something more. I hoped you'd take me home. Christine and Maggie shot a look at Debbie, who finally seemed to understand. Looking down at Melanie, I couldn't help but notice how nice she looked. Her natural hair color looked great on her. With her lovely eyes and comforting scent, it was hard for me to say no. Even if a part of me might have hesitated, it was clear I wanted to see where the night would lead. Ladies, it was nice to meet you, but since it's Melanie Brooks' divorce party, I need to do what she says. This sparked another round of cheers, not just from her friends, but even the guitarist cheered, "Holler and enjoy, everyone!" The whole bar raised their drinks and cheered for the night. I joined in, toasting everyone and taking a good sip of my beer before setting it down. She had her mouth open, trying to catch some of the spray. It was certainly unexpected, and I was still trying to understand it, my mind a bit cloudy from the moment. I want round two to be just as great as the first, and I don't want it to be messy, she said with a smile. Let's just say we didn't get much sleep that night. Even when I finally did doze off, Melanie woke me up with a gentle greeting. With my eyes still half closed, I noticed her looking up at me with her warm brown eyes. She seemed lost in the moment, her focus on me making me feel good. It was surprising. She had once said she would never be this open when we were married, but I wasn't complaining. I ran my fingers through her hair to signal that I was awake. She smiled but kept going, though soon we were interrupted. "Papa, I'm home!" shouted Abby from the living room. I wasn't sure how we had moved from the couch to my bedroom, but it felt like a good change of scenery, especially with Abby showing up. I quickly threw on my jeans and went out to greet my daughter, still rubbing sleep from my eyes, only to be met by another surprise. "Allie!" I didn't expect to see her here. Hey, Allie," I said, looking for a t-shirt to feel a bit more presentable. "Cool tattoos, Dad," Allie said, taking in my appearance for the first time. Abby chimed in, "Mom didn't come home last night, so I thought I'd take Allie around and show her the sights." "Wait, you knew she was down here?" I asked, surprised. Abby and Allie giggled, sharing a light-hearted moment together. "I told you I was out with friends," Abby said with a playful grin. Allie stood proudly, as if she had just revealed a trick. "Ta-da!" Just then, Melanie walked out of the bedroom. I turned to explain things, but I was caught off guard when I saw her wearing my Titans jersey. Why did these women like my jersey so much? Did you know about this? I asked Melanie, trying to gauge if she was part of this surprise. Melanie shook her head with a smile. "No. Christine and Debbie wanted to throw a gathering for me after my divorce, and since I've shared so many stories about Nashville, they decided to come here. I was just as surprised when Abby showed up at our hotel right before we were going out." Abby looked thrilled, like she had just won a prize. "So does this mean what I think it means?" Melanie answered first, seeming to sense my confusion. "It doesn't mean anything for sure. I'm not going to rush your father into anything he's not ready for." Honestly, I wasn't sure what would happen next. I wasn't ready to fully take her back because we still had some feelings to sort through, especially my trust issues. But I knew we weren't the same people we were 19 years ago. Maybe this was the start of a better friendship, or perhaps it could develop into something deeper. Only time would tell. Hey, audience! If you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.